Israel stands alone as the world's only Jewish state and the lone democracy in a sea of Middle East dictatorships. It's also the most misunderstood country on earth, according to Noa Tishby. This actress, now turned author, is on a personal mission to spread the truth about Israel around the globe. Take a look.
While not well known by American audiences, actress, producer, and activist Noa Tishby is a household name in her homeland. Born and raised in Tel Aviv, Noa got her start in the Israeli entertainment industry as a teenager. Over the years, she's appeared in many of Israel's leading TV, film, theater, and ad campaigns. When she moved to Hollywood, however, Noa realized most people she encountered in America knew little about Israel's history and culture. Others she met held misconceptions about the Jewish state. To set the record straight, Noa has written a book, Israel, a simple guide to the most misunderstood country on earth.
Well, Noa joins us now. Welcome to the 700 Club.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Tell us about your experience in L.A. Here you go from trying to make it in the entertainment industry in Tel Aviv, and then you get told this wonderful, if you want to make wine, you need to be in France. If you want to make movies, you need to be in L.A. So you moved to L.A., and you now discover something that you weren't ready for.
Yeah, so I started my career in the entertainment industry in Israel at a very young age and was very blessed and had great success over there.
Age 12.
Yeah, or 8, depends on when you start counting.
Okay.
Started
and your parents didn't know?
My parents didn't know, but I always say that if you have a child that has a calling, you can't stop that child. So they were very, they were just like, okay, go ahead and do what you want to do. So I started my career in the entertainment industry and was very self-centered in that way and didn't think much about Israel or the Jewish people or what does that mean spiritually to be Jewish and to be an Israeli. And then I moved to Los Angeles. I did great in Israel in entertainment. I moved to Los Angeles to pursue my career in entertainment. And then I started encountering the severe misunderstandings about Israel. And I come from a political family, so my mom always jokes that my DNA kicked in. And I found myself in this position of explaining to people about Israel and telling them, like, no, it's not. Okay, Hamas is not actually Hezbollah, and there's, here are the borders, this is what happened, and I found myself in this position of explaining to people what Israel is about, and throughout the years, took it professionally, and then I wrote this book, and the reason I wrote this book is because Israel's safety and security, it's not a Jewish people issue. It's not an Israeli people issue. It's a U.S. national security issue and Western civilization issue. So as I'm sure you know, and a lot of your viewers know, Israel's a stabilizing force within the Middle East. And there's no negating the indigenous justification, the moral justification, the historical justification of the existence of the state of Israel in the land of Israel. And I just couldn't sit still and watch people not know what they're talking about while having a lot of opinions about it, which is the worst. Like, if you don't know anything about it, just don't talk. And I just had to do something about it, so I wrote this book.
L.A. also awakened in you a desire to learn more about your Jewish heritage.
Yeah, I did.
Because you were raised secular.
I was.
And it was getting a phone call. We're celebrating Rosh Hashanah, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And
you read the book.
Yeah, I did.
This is great.
And why? Why did L.A. start that in you?
I think that once you take a fish out of water, they start realizing what the water actually was. So the story is that I was... or you move the fish to another fish bowl, and they kind of look and go, oh, there's another fish bowl there, right? I was in LA a few months, and I got a phone call one morning from my family, and they all went, happy holidays, and I went, okay, happy holidays, what holiday is it? And said, oh, it's Rosh Hashanah. And I completely forgot that it was Rosh Hashanah, and my heart sank. And what it brought me to is to re-examine what it means to be Jewish. What is the spiritual teaching that the Jewish people have been given, and what is my responsibility if I don't live in Israel and I don't have it kind of surrounded, every day, and not celebrating Rosh Hashanah, because everybody is celebrating Rosh Hashanah. If I live out of Israel, what does that mean to be Jewish? What is the spiritual calling? What is the responsibility that I have as a human being to pass this information onwards? And it was a great place to start as a secular person, because I looked at it from kind of like a spiritual point of view, scientific point of view, a family-oriented point of view, and I found a lot of incredibly inspiring answers through this journey, which brought me to this book as well.
One of the things I've noticed, even within the secular community of Israel, which is pronounced, particularly in Tel Aviv, that they all universally buy into the thought that Israel is to be a light to the nations.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think that one of the most powerful mandates that Jewish people have, and it's something that's in you, whether you're secular or super religious, is the mandate of tikkun olam. So making the world a better place is something that is kind of ingrained in Jewish culture, in a way, in a lot of other cultures as well, obviously. But that is something that I believe that people in Israel do feel that responsibility. Like, we need to strive to be just a little better and just, make the world better. And this is very apparent by, for example, the amount of startup companies and academic papers and, all these things that, that Israel contributes to the world, which is completely disproportionate to its size. So definitely punching above its weight.
Well, the amount of humanitarian work Israelis do and volunteer for on a regular basis, and go to like 130 countries to provide humanitarian aid. They're definitely, a country the size of New Jersey doing that much humanitarian work is really surprising. Let me turn to the real meat of your book, and I'm really applaud you for digging into the boycott, divestment, sanction movement and following the money on that. So here you have a country whose very ideology, if you will, is we're to be a light to the nations. And now they're being accused of being an apartheid state, of oppression, things that are, all of these things. What's the origin of that?
So this is a little complicated, but I go in depth into this in my book, in a movement called the BDS Movement, which stands for Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, which is a movement that's trying to brand Israel an apartheid state. Obviously, all the facts negate that. This originated over 20 years ago in the Durban Conference Against Racism, which was so anti-Semitic that the United States and Israel actually walked out. Exactly.
And refused to participate to this day.
Yeah, obviously. So this is where this language originated. Now, here's the thing to understand. Israel's enemies have tried to destroy her, first with military, with other countries, then with terrorism, with terrorist attacks and airplanes attacks. Both of these didn't work. And then they shifted their tactics from actual attacking the country to what I call in the book a slow-moving terrorist attack, which is delegitimizing Israel's right to exist as the homeland of the Jewish people. And they came up with this language trying to shake the foundation of Israel's legitimacy. And I would venture to say that they succeeded beyond their belief at this point, but I'm here to fight it. So I would be very cautious if I'm a parent about a movement called BDS Movement and what they do to our kids on college campuses, because they're hiding.
Why have they targeted the college campuses? Because they seem to be enormously successful.
Absolutely.
To my absolute amazement, Yale University, their student government passed a resolution supporting BDS.
There are so many campuses in which what they did is basically they concluded that young Americans are naive, and they shifted their work to college campuses, and they descend on college campuses in around voting season. And their intention, it's not even to pass the resolution, because who cares if a university passes this or that resolution, right? It's about creating that resolution and that vote to begin with to become legitimate, such that the college kids then walk out to the real world and go, oh, we voted against it on college, we can vote against it in city council or in the elections. So that's what they're doing. They're funded by really bad people that needs to be investigated.
Well, how did they get that funding? Because when you talk about every single college campus in the United States, and you're trying to change the minds of the future leaders of America.
Yeah, and voters,
that's the intent. That's what they're trying to do. You can't do that on a long, sustained basis without a ton of money. We're not talking a little bit, we're talking a lot. How are they getting that funding?
I would encourage people to read my book. I go down a rabbit hole on this. There's a full-on chapter about BDS. There are also congressional hearings by a man called Jonathan Chasner, who is a terrorism finance expert, who did a very big, long dive into the sources of funding. This is something that the authorities...
He's a former Treasury official.
Yes, he is.
And he was tasked with finding terror money and tracking it as a forensic accountant.
Exactly. And he has been calling for FBI and IRS investigation for a very long time. So I hope to amplify his voice and voices like that to actually take this on, because this is dangerous, again, for national security of the United States and for Western civilization and everything we stand for.
All right, I've got to ask, because it's really bugging me. How is BDS infiltrating the Jewish community in America? Ben & Jerry's was founded by two Jewish men, and they're now saying we're no longer going to sell ice cream in the West Bank. And they're saying we can't be anti-Semitic because we're Jewish. How in the world did that happen?
I believe that Ben and Jerry themselves are definitely not anti-Semites, but what they're doing is unknowingly working for anti-Semites and actually fulfilling on their wishes. So here's the thing with BDS. We live in a free country. Anybody can say what they want, okay? BDS is hiding their intention. So BDS is a movement that is after the dismantlement of the State of Israel as a Jewish state, period, end of story. The founder doesn't hide it. Their supporters and leaders don't find it. But what they do when they go to college, they don't say, let's dismantle a democratic state. They talk about freedom and justice, right? That's what they talk about. And they dupe people to support them. A lot of them Jews who think that they're supporting some sort of a governmental policy, which we're all for. We all love democracy, but that's not what BDS is about. BDS is about dismantling the Jewish state, and they should and need to be stopped.
Do you have hope for peace in Israel?
I definitely do.
What gives you that hope?
What gives me that is being on the ground in Israel and living there and growing up there. And when you go to Israel, you see that coexistence on the ground is way more powerful, and it's kind of like a seamless thing. We live through this all the time. So we know how to live together in peace. We know how to live together with our neighbors. Israel is the fruit of a tree that's roots are 3,500 years old, and I believe that this is not going away anytime. And we have every possibility to live together in peace, and we will, as we still do.
And let me echo that. As a Christian, the only nation in the Middle East where the Christian population is actually growing is Israel. And you look at what has happened in the West Bank to a little town called Bethlehem, that when I first visited there in 1969 was 80% Christian. Today, under the Palestinian Authority, it's less than 20% Christian. The Christians have been driven out.
Oh my God.
So you look at the BDS saying it's an apartheid and it's oppressive and it's a genocide. Just look at what happened to the Jewish quarter from 1948 to 1967, where if you were Jewish, you couldn't possibly step foot in the Jewish quarter. It was illegal for you to do that. And all the synagogues were destroyed throughout the West Bank. So I'm with you on this. Anyway.
Thank you so much.
We could talk a long time. The book is called Israel, A Simple Guide to the Most Misunderstood Country on Earth. There's a caution here. The language can sometimes get a little salty, but that's okay. It's available wherever books are sold. So, Noa, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.